Hello, everyone. The title of my talk today is Social Construction Grounding? And the main aim of my talk will be to raise a problem for a ground-theoretic account of social construction, and then to consider various responses to this problem. So the talk will be in 3 parts. In the first part, I will discuss the ground-theoretic account of social construction. In the second part, I'll present the problem and outline what I think are the available responses. And then in the third part, I will consider these responses in more detail and conclude by endorsing one of them. Okay, so on to the first part, social construction as grounding. So the notion of social construction plays an important role in many discussions in social ontology. So, for example, feminist theorists have maintained that gender, and sometimes sex, is not a biological phenomenon, but rather a social construct. Race theorists argue over whether race is biologically real or socially constructed. And disability theorists have argued over whether disability is a natural phenomenon or a social construct. Now, in order to understand these various positions and debates, we need to understand what it is for something to be socially constructed. But as of yet, there's no consensus on how exactly this notion, or perhaps cluster of notions, is to be understood. So recently, a number of theorists, including Jonathan Schaffer and Aaron Griffith, have proposed a ground-theoretic analysis. And the basic idea of the ground-theoretic proposal is that at least one important notion of social construction, namely that of constitutive social construction, which can be distinguished from causal social construction, may be analyzed in terms of the notion of metaphysical ground. So let me say just a few words about metaphysical grounding. So metaphysical grounding is a distinctively metaphysical, non-causal determination relation. So a nice illustrative example is provided by the Euthyphro dilemma. So Euthyphro and Socrates in this dilemma, we may suppose, agree that all and only pious acts are loved by the gods. But whereas Euthyphro maintains that pious acts are pious because they're loved by the gods, Socrates disagrees with this. And this because relation is the relation of metaphysical grounding. So on the Euthyphronic view, the piety of an act is grounded in that act's being loved by the gods, whereas on the Socratic view, that's not the case. Now, for our purposes, the most important features of grounding are that the grounds metaphysically determine and explain that which is grounded, and the grounded metaphysically depends upon its grounds. Okay, so then a simple ground-theoretic analysis of social construction might go as follows. To be socially constructed is to be grounded in the social. And I should note that, as far as I'm aware, no one's actually proposed this simple version of the view, but it will be helpful for our purposes to start with the simple version, and then we'll consider the specific proposals that have actually been made. Okay, so let me mention then a few virtues of this sort of ground-theoretic analysis of social construction. And these virtues have been discussed by both Schaffer and Griffith. So one virtue is that many social constructionists have wanted to maintain that social constructs are real despite being socially constructed. And the ground-theoretic account allows one to do this. And that's because social constructs on this account are real, at least in the sense that they exist, in spite of being socially constructed. So another virtue of the account is that it allows us to integrate social construction into a more general metaphysics, namely the framework of grounding. And finally, the ground-theoretic account accounts for why social constructs are non-fundamental and why they're generated by, dependent upon, and explicable on the basis of social factors. So these are some of the virtues of the analysis that might lead us to want to adopt this sort of account of constitutive social construction. Okay, so let's then move on to the second part of the talk, which is the problem for the ground-theoretic analysis. So the basic problem is very simple. It's that the account seems to face various counterexamples, and here I'll present one. So consider the singleton of the Supreme Court. So that is the set whose sole members the Supreme Court. So the existence of the singleton is grounded in the existence of the Supreme Court, and so it's grounded in the social. But at least intuitively, the existence of the Supreme Court is not socially constructed. And so we have a counterexample to the simple ground-theoretic analysis. And I should note that this problem has been raised by others, including Schaffer himself, and also Emily Pagano in a recent 2021 paper. Okay, so is there any hope of resisting this counterexample by, say, arguing that it's not a genuine counterexample? So I think that there's not much hope of doing that. So despite the various disagreements amongst grounding theorists, there's actually widespread agreement that the existence of a set is grounded in the existence of its members. And so that entails that the existence of singleton Supreme Court is grounded in the existence of the Supreme Court. And so the existence of the singleton is grounded in the social. So it seems very hard to deny that. Okay, so what about just biting the bullet and saying that, look, actually, the existence of singleton Supreme Court is socially constructed, and maybe that's fine, and we should just accept that. So I think that's also not so plausible. So despite the huge variety of social constructionist claims that have been made by social constructionists, nobody in the literature, as far as I'm aware, has maintained that the existence of any set is socially constructed. Furthermore, sets are mathematical objects, and mathematical objects would seem to be paradigm examples of things that are not socially constructed. And so I think it's not so plausible to bite the bullet here and say that this is not a genuine counterexample, because in fact, the existence of the singleton is socially constructed. Okay, so if we accept that this is a genuine counterexample to the account, then we have a challenge for us as grounding theorists who want to give a ground-theoretic account of social construction. And the challenge is this: it's to identify what exactly distinguishes genuine cases of social construction from other cases of mere grounding in the social. And so, as far as I can see, there are at least broadly speaking, four possible responses that one might make to this challenge. So the first would be to say that what distinguishes these genuine cases of social construction from other cases of grounding in the social is something about the grounds. And that's the most, I think, straightforward sort of response. A different second response would be to say that, no, what distinguishes the genuine cases of social construction is actually something about what's getting grounded in these cases. A fourth sort of response would instead appeal to the grounding relation and say that what's distinctive about cases of social construction is something about the grounding relation that's involved in those cases. And finally, a different sort of response would say that what's distinctive about cases of social construction is something about the metagrounds of the relevant grounding fact, where the metagrounds are what grounds some particular grounding fact. And in these cases, the grounding fact would have the socially constructed fact as the grounds, then it would have, as what's getting grounded, and then that fact that those grounds have the grounds that they do would have a further ground, the metaground. And so it would be the metaground that distinguishes the genuine cases of social construction. Okay, so that's an outline of what I take to be the different responses that one might make to this challenge. So now I want to go on to the third part of the talk, where I'll discuss these responses in detail, and I'll raise some problems for the first three sorts of responses, And then I'll end by endorsing the last sort of response. So let's then begin with the first response, which says that what's distinctive to the cases of genuine social construction is something about the grounds. So here I'll start with Jonathan Schaffer's account of social construction, which I think can be understood as advocating this sort of response to the problem. So according to Schaffer's account, to be socially constructed is to be grounded in distinctive social patterns. And Schaffer explicitly says that distinctive here is just a placeholder for whatever the relevant social patterns end up being. So this account then says that, well, what's distinctive or special about the genuine cases of social construction is that, unlike other cases of grounding in the social, there's going to be some sort of distinctive social patterns present in the genuine social construction cases. So this account avoids the problem that was raised because distinctive can presumably be understood in such a way that the existence of Singleton Supreme Court is not grounded in the relevant sorts of social patterns, even if it is grounded in some social patterns or others, or even some social factors. Now, I think that the problem for this sort of response to the problem that we raised is that even though it does get around the initial counterexample, I think we can pretty easily construct a version of this counterexample that still applies to this view. So however it is that we understand distinctive, we can take some social pattern P that meets the relevant qualification for being that distinctive social pattern. And then we can consider the singleton of P. So this existence of the singleton of P then is grounded in the relevant sorts of distinctive social patterns, and yet it's not socially constructed. Okay, so is there a way then of modifying this Schaffer-style account to get around this problem? So one might try to modify the account by using or appealing to further distinctions that are available to the grounding theorist. So these include the distinction between partial and full ground, and the distinction between immediate and mediate ground. And so specifically, one might try to draw on Schaffer's 2018 model of rule setting and move making. And this modified account then would say that to be socially constructed is to be immediately partially grounded in the existence of some social rule R, and immediately partially grounded in move-making facts P1 through Pn. And I should note that Schaffer himself does not propose this sort of account of social construction. So that being said, this account does avoid the problem that we raised for his original account. And so it avoids this problem because the existence of singleton P is not immediately partially grounded in the existence of some social rule and immediately partially grounded in some move-making facts. Okay, but I think that there's a good reason that Schaffer himself doesn't endorse this sort of account, and that's because it faces a different problem, also a problem concerning extension. And the problem is that this modified account, I think, is not general enough to encompass many genuine cases of social construction. So instead of letting in too many cases, this modified account excludes, I think, many genuine cases of social construction. So for example, suppose that two people agree that a certain river is to be the border between their respective territories, thereby creating a border. So here I think we would want to say that the border is socially constructed, and yet it doesn't seem that its existence is immediately partially grounded in the existence of a social rule, since in this case, there wasn't any social rule that was part of the grounds of the border's existence. Okay, and so for that reason, I think that we should reject this sort of modified account. And more generally, I think that what this shows is that it will be quite difficult to come up with, I think, a response along these lines that's going to distinguish genuine cases of social construction by complicating the grounds, because in complicating the grounds, we're going to end up actually leaving out some genuine cases of social construction that might not fit, one particular mold of how social facts may get constructed. Okay, so let's move on then to the second sort of response, which focuses not on the grounds, but instead on what's getting grounded. And here I'll start with Aaron Griffith's account, which I think could be read as advancing this sort of response to the original problem that we posed. So according to Griffith's account, a person S is socially constructed as a member of human social kind K, just in case the fact that S is a K is at least partially grounded in certain features of social reality, in particular, specific repeated patterns of human interaction that involve individual or collective responses to the subject's body or perception thereof, which are not inevitable, natural, or fixed. So this account, I think, avoids the problem that was raised, because what's getting grounded in cases of social construction here is always a fact of the form S is a K, where S is a person and K is a human social kind. And the fact that Singleton Supreme Court exists is not a fact of the form S is a K. And so that won't be a case of social construction on this account. So I think that this account, or this way of responding to our problem, faces exactly the sort of problem that we just raised for the modified version of Schaffer's account. So namely, the account is just not general enough to encompass many genuine cases of social construction. For example, the social construction of social objects like borders, states, and corporations. And that's because in these cases, what's getting grounded is just not a fact of the form S is a K, but rather a fact of some other form, such as X exists. Now, I should note that this is not a problem for Griffith's account per se, but it is a problem when the account is viewed as providing a response to the problem that we raised. And that's because the account only succeeds in avoiding this problem because it's giving a partial account of social construction. So let me now consider a different sort of account, which I'll call the essentialist account, which also tries to, or attempts to solve the problem that we raised by appeal to what's getting grounded. So on this essentialist account, at least when it comes to the social construction of objects, what distinguishes the genuine cases of social construction from other cases of grounding in the social is that what's getting grounded in cases of social construction is the essence of X, rather than, or perhaps in addition to, the existence of X. So for example, when a border is socially constructed, it's the very essence of the border that's grounded in the social, and not just the existence of the border. So this account then avoids the problem because in the case of Singleton Supreme Court, it's only the existence of the singleton that's grounded in the social. The essence of the singleton is not grounded in the social. So I think that this is a really interesting sort of account, but I do think that there are several drawbacks, though I don't know that I would really call them problems so much as just drawbacks. So one drawback is that this account obviously appeals to a further theoretical notion, namely that of essence. But some grounding theorists, including Jonathan Schaffer, are not very hospitable to this notion of essence. And so this sort of account would not be acceptable to them. So furthermore, even among the grounding theorists that are hospitable to the notion of essence, there are many who think that essentialist facts just don't have any grounds. So for instance, Shamik Dasgupta has argued that essentialist facts are not even apt for being grounded. And so again, this account would be unacceptable to these theorists as well. And so I think that at least other things being equal, it would be preferable to try to develop a ground theoretic account of social construction that grounding theorists in general could accept, rather just some subset of grounding theorists who kind of accept this further notion of essence and accept that essentialist facts can have grounds. Okay, so let me now move on to the third response, which tries to appeal to the grounding relation. So the specific account I'll consider, I'll call the varieties of grounding account. And this account says that what distinguishes genuine cases of social construction from other cases of grounding in the social is the variety of grounding that's involved. So specifically, in cases of social construction, there's a distinct variety of social grounding involved. Whereas in other cases of grounding in the social, the variety of grounding that's involved is just the usual variety of metaphysical grounding. And so this account then invokes an idea that's already present in the grounding literature, which is that there are these different varieties of grounding. So in the literature, some, for example, have distinguished metaphysical grounding from normative grounding. And this account kind of extends this idea and proposes this further new variety of grounding, namely social grounding. And that then is the key to distinguishing cases of social construction. Okay, and so this account then avoids the problem that we raised, because in the case of Singleton Supreme Court, the variety of grounding that's involved is just the usual metaphysical grounding, rather than this new variety of social grounding. So I think that this account is less promising for the following reasons. So perhaps the main problem is that one of the main advantages of a ground-theoretic account of social construction in the first place was supposed to be that it integrates social construction into this more general metaphysics, namely the metaphysics or the framework of grounding. But once we introduce this distinctive variety of social grounding, arguably much of this advantage is lost. Furthermore, and relatedly, unless more, I think a lot more, is said about what exactly this distinctive variety of social grounding is, social grounding just seems to be a label for precisely those cases of grounding in the social, which are genuine cases of social construction. But then it looks like this proposal is really just relabeling the problem that was posed, rather than actually providing a solution to the problem. Okay, so now I'll go on to the final response, which is the response that I think is the most promising and that I would like to endorse. And so this is the Metaground response. So the basic idea here is that when we have a case of social construction, we have some socially constructed fact that has some grounds. Let's say the grounds are facts Q1 through Qn. And then there's the grounding fact, which is the fact that Q1 through Qn ground the socially constructed fact P. And the proposal then is that the metaground of this grounding fact, so what grounds the grounding fact, is going to be something social. So the metagrounds will be something social. So here's a more precise formulation of this sort of idea. So a fact P is socially constructed just in case there are some facts Q1 through Qn, which together fully ground P, and there's some distinct social fact R, which at least partially grounds the relevant grounding fact, namely the fact that Q1 through Qn ground P. So now we're distinguishing genuine cases of social construction, not by appeal to the grounds, and not by appeal to what's getting grounded, and not by appeal to the grounding relation, but rather we're looking at a grounding fact where the fact getting grounded is the socially constructed fact, and then there are some other facts Q1 through Qn, which are the grounds. And then we're saying that that grounding fact, the fact that Q1 through Qn ground P, is going to be at least partially grounded in something social. Okay, so this metaground proposal avoids the problem that we raised because the relevant grounding fact involving singleton Supreme Court, namely the fact that the existence of the Supreme Court grounds the existence of singleton Supreme Court, is not itself partially grounded in any social facts. Okay, so let me conclude by just noting a few advantages of this metaground account. So one advantage is that it avoids the original counterexample, as well as any versions of the counterexample, at least as far as I can see. So another advantage is that, unlike some of the other accounts, this account is general enough to encompass what I think is the full range of cases of social construction. So furthermore, the account doesn't appeal to any further metaphysical notions like the notion of essence, which some grounding theorists may not accept. It does appeal to the notion of metaground, but pretty much all grounding theorists are kind of fine with that notion, since really it's just a notion, a specific notion of ground. And finally, this account is not just relabeling the problem like the varieties of grounding account. And so for all of these reasons, I think this is probably the most promising alternative and one that's worth exploring further. Thank you.